Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our ProductTank event tonight. My name is Dian Mikhailov Dido. I will be your host tonight. As usual, we're starting with a short intro of the community, and afterwards we're going with our guest tonight. So, about ProductTank Sofia. ProductTank as a whole, the community started back in 2010 in London, and at first the idea was to be an informal meetup. Where people just met and exchanged knowledge about products and about how they do product. Now, 10 years later, the community spans over 185 cities and more than 80,000 members. And it has actually grown quite a bit from informal meetups to monthly events in many cities, but also several conferences, blogs, and so on. The ProductTank community actually expanded to Sofia, and we started a ProductTank here back in 2015. And when I say we, these are the organizers here in Sofia, me, Maria Rashkovska, whom you already know from other events, and Boris Rangelov, who actually was the host of our latest event. So if you guys have any questions, comments, or in general want to interact in any way with the community, please feel free to find us on LinkedIn and drop us a message. Now, about our monthly events, product tanks are run by product managers for product managers in general. So at the monthly events, you will actually find out that a lot of what we do is actually discussing product, also discussing many aspects that we are interested in. Our monthly events are not in the form of company pitches or marketing presentations or employer branding. It's more like strictly things that we could use in our everyday work. And companies that we have actually invited before include Financial Times, Ocado, LinkedIn, Uber, and so on. Now, I mentioned that the community actually expanded quite a lot from informal meetups. So basically here in Bulgaria, we have a Facebook group with more than 1,700 members. We have the monthly meetups. We also have the global Mind the Product vlog with a lot of videos, probably more than 1,000 now. There you could actually find lots of useful recordings from our events around the world. The website is mindtheproduct.com. And of course, the other things that I mentioned were trainings. You are welcome to search the website for that. We have quite a few that we offer around the world. And conferences that are actually this year online. Usually they are in Singapore, London, San Francisco, but this year they're mostly online or entirely online. Now, about our local group. So we tend to connect mostly on Facebook. Our Facebook group can be found if you search on ProductTank Sofia community on Facebook and join. How is this group useful? Basically, there you could ask for advice. There are a lot of product managers that struggle with different types of issues, and it's great to actually crowdsource your questions and get useful tips and tricks. We do share very interesting reads, blog posts, articles, even videos from other product tanks. But mostly, if you or your company has a job ad related to product managers, you're welcome to post it there as well. We do get quite good turnout on job ads. And of course, they are free. We do not charge anything. So feel free to use that if you're looking for product managers or any kind of product people for your company. Now, a couple of logistic questions before we start. On your right, on YouTube, you will see the chat channel. You're welcome to post any questions you have there for our guest, and we will have a look and review them at the end in our Q&A session. Now, something else. Right now, we are running our 2020 annual product management survey. We are every year gathering useful insights about the ecosystem here in Bulgaria. Very interesting aspects such as salary levels, main aspects of the product management profession here in Bulgaria, as well as how the product management community is growing, and future insights. In the chat on top, if you scroll all the way up, you will see a link that I posted to the survey. If you are an acting product manager here in Bulgaria, please fill in this survey, and the results, of course, will be presented next month, and we will share them with the whole community so you can actually gain useful insights about the profession. Thanks a lot in advance about that. Now, on to our guest tonight. This is Maria Mladenova, coming to us live from Berlin, where she is based. Now, one of the side effects of COVID is that we can now actually invite guests from all over the world, and we use that opportunity to actually connect with Maria. She is a principal product manager at Zalando, as I said, based in Berlin. And a little bit about Zalando. That's for those that haven't met the company yet or the brand, that's one of the biggest fashion retailers in Europe and the world. If you want to get a good picture of the scale, the company handles more than 140 million orders per year and generates revenues in the excess of 6 billion euro per year. So with that in mind, Maria will talk about how they do product at Zalando and how in logistics and warehousing, where she's working, they're actually building product in line with the company strategy. So now I will let Maria in. Good evening.
Good evening.
I already introduced you, and now I'm handing over to you to share your insights with us.
Yes, great. Thanks a lot for the introduction and for the opportunity to present Zalando and talk a little bit about our challenges. So I'll start right away. You already heard more or less what I do, maybe a little bit of further information. I was with the company now for more than 2.5 years in the department. So I really started from the beginning of some of the process and changes that we're doing now, and can tell you quite a lot of the history of what we've been through in the past 3 years as well. But today I'll focus mostly on the challenges in terms of aligning such a department and specifically the product part of it with the company strategy. And the interesting thing here is that we're developing internal products. So in this case, that's not exactly a product that the end customer of Zalando or the brands and suppliers of Zalando would see. It's more a product that would be used internally in logistics and warehousing. So starting from the broader context of the company, because we need to connect to company strategy, what we see are 3 main investment areas. You would find that also on the company website and general corporate strategy documents. We invest in our customer value proposition, in the supplier and partner value proposition, and in building Zalando as such. So infrastructure investments which allow us to grow in this platform model we are following since 2015. The company leverages what it has already built as capabilities and optimized processes along its path in wholesale to now offer to partners and customers as new possibilities and advantages in platform state. And we aim to be the starting point of fashion. So starting from the customer proposition, we build relationships with the customer beyond the transaction. So we want the customers to be not only engaged with the content and the platform itself, but also to receive better convenience and to shop in a more convenient way in this e-commerce fashion platform. For the brands and suppliers, we want to offer them exactly those capabilities that I already spoke about, and make sure that we give them an advantage in the e-commerce fashion market. So we support their transition to the digital age in short. Some numbers, so you already mentioned some of them. These are from last year, but that's also important to understand strategically where the company is going. The overall numbers are on the left from last year, but also here are some of the key KPIs that we pursue and are published also in the corporate communications for what the company tries to improve year on year. And what's important here to know when you have to work in a product department within the company is that the growth that we're targeting for the next 2 to 3 years is in the scale of 20 to 25% and around a 50 million uplift in EBIT. So that gives you an idea of how this has to scale on a very, very broad perspective. In terms of the organizational structure and the product areas, of course, some product areas are more naturally staffed with product and engineering teams, especially the ones that have very close relationship to the end customer or to the suppliers. There you would have very strong digitalization as well, and like almost completely software products that would be heavily driven and managed by product and engineering teams. But you also have teams like mine, where you have product managers developing internal and supporting capabilities, and there it's more challenging as it's highly dependent on physical warehouse processes, in investments overall in growing the logistics network and in automation and other business improvements as well. So your targets are usually shared with business departments and investment strategies that are much more operational than they are in other departments. But these are just some bubbles of departments where we do have product managers, some of them more prevalent, some are not so well supported by product. Overall, in logistics, when we zoom in, we have quite a bit of a fulfillment network, and you could consider the fulfillment network itself as part of the product landscape, let's say, on a very high level of the company, because we do leverage this network not only to deliver to our own customers, but also to offer to partners as well. And the main hubs and spokes are 7 plus 2 that are in the works, but the return centers facilities are also quite a lot. And so that's a very rough map of how we're placed. And this includes the fulfillment network as such includes as capabilities, of course, the software capabilities that are built into the WMS system. So good. So far, we've seen that fulfillment is a key component of the competencies of the company and something that we know and want to leverage. So it's important to also continue optimizing it from the software side as well. But what do we, where do we go from here? So further zooming into what logistics usually tries to achieve, operations would focus on high-level KPIs that are very typical for this type of business, like dispatch on promise, dispatch on time, costs, logistics cost per order and item, and then of course other customer satisfaction KPIs, cancellation rates, inbound SLAs. These are things that they would usually report on, but they are very heavily connected to capacities. On the higher level of the strategy, we have more customer and customer related satisfaction and detractor KPIs, more granularly defined, but on operational side, you would mostly focus on how much and how fast and how well you fulfill. So what happens to a product manager that lands in the WMS team then? What would be the challenges? What would be the context of where they operate in? First of all, the customer fulfillment department as such is quite huge. So I gave some examples here. That's not the full structure, but we have quite a few departments, as I said, that make decisions for investment and optimization that are not software based. So they would have, so here in the bottom, you see those three main pillars of the product and engineering teams that work in this context. So one of them is WMS. The other two are the network level, the decisions that are made on for allocation and overall stock, and the transport level. But in general, there are a lot of other decision makers that drive for their own goals within this department. We have, for example, an innovation team that tries to find new technologies for the warehouse, a planning team that plans new warehouses. We have improvement teams for the warehousing processes. We have supporting teams like business intelligence that provides insights and data, and so on and so forth. Zooming into the WMS part, we actually have three parts or three pillars within this piece of the organization. One of them deals more with algorithmic products. The part where I work on is the infrastructure and overarching tools piece. And we also have integration with the mechanical automation and applications that are also in a different pillar, which is another challenge as the products are split more by product type and not exactly by targets, like strategy connected targets that would have to be achieved. Yes, so you're basically here. So starting to work as a product manager in this context, the first question, of course, is who do you serve? Who are your customers? One way to answer that would be, of course, to say warehouse operations or all of those teams that you saw in the previous slide, so not only the warehouse managers, but also the teams that make investments, improvements, and so on. And don't get me wrong, I mean, our warehouse staff is actually all full of great people. So I spent probably more than the first year of my work actually meeting them, interviewing them, understanding their needs, visiting the warehouses often, breaking down what they do, they're into different personas, and trying to see where the pieces that we need to optimize may lie. And that's, of course, great because for any product manager operating in this type of structure, you would have to understand the other departments that you work with, and especially the roles that you directly serve very closely. But what I would like to argue here is that this is not really enough to actually connect you to the strategy of the company. So what would you do better? Of course, consider the Zalando end customer and consider the partners or suppliers of Zalando as well, as they're a key part of the customer proposition. What happens if you don't do that? First of all, so I'll describe a few pitfalls here that I think we've seen in the last years. First of all, operational teams will likely improve within the framework of what they already know. So you would have existing process and software that they think in the frame of, and then they would come up with ideas of how to do things better, faster, cheaper, and so on. To help yourself in this situation, it would be logical to construct some kind of bottom-up value driver tree, so at least you understand what potentially has the bigger impact on what. This helps to some extent, but still is in the framework only of what you're operating with, what is already there. That's just an example of the value tree or part of the value tree actually that we have for WMS that I did for myself to try and understand exactly this. And this by itself could be quite a complex task, but in the end, to move forward, I would argue there are other things to consider, and we'll see that in the next slides. The second pitfall is that business or operational teams will likely reach out to you when they don't see any other way. So you're kind of if you put yourself in the role to only serve them, you would be a service provider, not really a partner. And they would likely make decisions that influence KPIs that you're supposed to jointly influence. Even worse, you might be asked to support on some of those decisions that are not made with a product mindset in mind, and might not even be impactful or profitable at all. So that's definitely another pitfall if you don't connect yourself to the strategy. Then the third one I would mention is that operations can at points oversee also the perspective of the strategic perspective of impacting the end customer. Yes, you can assume that they know what the strategy is and they're aligned with the strategy, and by serving their needs, that's enough. But they would, because they're so focused on how they execute, how fast and how cost efficient, you would have things like demand, weight, availability maybe fall through the cracks. Like what do we show to the customers in the different markets of what they actually want to buy? And this would probably be solved in like initial state by some kind of Excel file or G sheets in a very suboptimal way, if anyone even thinks about solving this. So these types of problems and optimization gaps would be left probably untouched. And the fourth one would be that they would, because they don't have an understanding of the software, they wouldn't understand how software scales or what are the possible benefits that could be realized through a good architecture and a scalable architecture. And you would end up with what we had when I joined the company, which is an organically grown system of things that are bundled together in many places ad hoc. This, of course, also works, but creates a lot of manual effort and inefficiency, and of course doesn't scale. So what's next when you start to consider the value proposition? One way to do it is, of course, to look into NPS drivers. Zalando as a whole is transitioning to a CLV-driven model, but NPS is still something that we have very good reports on, and you can orient yourself at least around the impact that logistics has on the strategy by those areas, and be aware of what areas you can create hypotheses in. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of them. This excludes returns and customer care as departments. But what's also important is to consider CLV and what we call PC2, or customer profit after returns. Business improvement teams are already tracking models for measuring profit per customer after returns and the relation to CLV. So one way to think about it is also try and think about the CLV itself and how the different activities that we have in logistics connect to it. Of course, splitting the customers to new and existing, active, inactive, and the main levers to maximize the CLV itself. So being aware at least of those ideas and pushing for that to connect to any decision in the department, of course, helps. Then to put a little bit of a stop here, because I present quite a bit of the context and how you would operate in product as part of the logistics department, I wanted to ask ourselves, and maybe you can add questions or take some time to like a minute or two to think about that. What would be stopping us like in this context as a product team from being aligned with company strategy? So that's something that, of course, our management would ask as well if I brought this up as an issue. What's in this structure, in this type of setup, what's stopping us from being aligned? We will go through some examples and I'll explain what I think are some of the issues and how we will try to solve them. But yes, do mark some points that come to mind in the time being. This is more or less what we do in terms of prioritization or how the different new ideas flow into the roadmap. And I'll explain some challenges here. So currently, we focus on the first two streams, and this will be the focus for quite some time to continue growing the logistics network, so adding new greenfield warehouses to the network. And with each new greenfield warehouse, you hit, unfortunately, some roadblocks and some walls with the software that you already have. So you have to further add features to allow for the new automation, for example, that comes in the warehouse. We tackled that with the modular architecture that thankfully was already started when I started with the team. And this is so far going quite well. We think that it would solve the issue of having to put a lot of effort in every new automation piece, in every new use case when it comes to process design inside the warehouse. But besides that, there are, of course, also internal and external streams of ideas that come from outside of the department or just from one of those business and operations teams that you saw that have to be evaluated. We'll have to see what software products are needed to realize this impact and, of course, prioritized in some way. And last but not least, we have also some hypotheses and ideas ourselves that we want to test as a product team and pitch for prioritization. So these are the streams. What was the challenge? So we focus along the overall strategic objective of growth, and we do make sure that we allow for the growth of capacities in an efficient way. So these new warehouses that get added to the network. But the initiatives that come below that, the ones that come internally and externally, and the ones that we think of, we cannot clearly prioritize according to one North Star, if you want, metric for customer fulfillment, as we're not exactly clear on how the targets that we have in customer fulfillment are related to the, in the end, to COV. So this is a very kind of rough exercise to do that. If there's any capacity left from the first two streams, what is really delivered usually comes as a add kind of capacity that is just fulfilled by some small project that we think might fit into some engineering team, or when it's really important and is kind of carryover from a different department's operational plan, it's prioritized on an operational plan, kind of strategic high-level roadmap for the department. So that those are more or less the ways these initiatives go into the plan, but this is not very well supported by how everything draws into the North Star. Unfortunately, logistics by itself is viewed very often rather as a cost center than a department directly moving customer metrics. So that also has this mindset of maybe we're not so important in terms of connecting ourselves to the COV. So some some examples that I can give from practice, maybe that would be also interesting, and explain some challenges with this situation in the context that we operate in and how we would like to solve them. And the first one is about steering system that we want to implement and are currently implementing in WMS. It's a whole new way of steering the outbound flow of the WMS. And for that, because the teams are split in the way they're split in, this is something that was required a lot of alignment between different teams, and it took quite a bit of time until the whole concept crystallized and was put into stages, and we were clear on how to deliver it. The benefit of the idea was clear, and was we were able to measure what the hypothesis is, but the way we deliver that with the current structure of the split of the teams was hard. And short term, what do we do about it? Of course, we make sure that all of our PMs are very tightly connected so that they can resolve dependencies and they're aware of each other's roadmaps. But mid to long term, what would really help for such issues is to connect better in the end to strategy and to know to have those cross-team roadmaps on KPIs that are directly impacting or contributing to the COV. In another example, we had to implement a project for expiration date handlings for the beauty products that we're selling in the shop. That's something that I worked on. I was super happy with as a feature. It was a very long feature with many different software pieces that we delivered. And for that, the way it started, however, was with mock-ups and kind of very detailed documents in terms of process, but also in terms of software changes that was directly handed over to me from the process department. And that really lost us a lot of time in alignment of expectation and changes that I had to do to make sure that we optimize for specific main and guardrail KPIs that they didn't consider. They also made, of course, recommendations of software changes within what they already know, which was not doable with the new architecture that we were aiming for. So we had to redesign everything. So all the work, which was, I think, 2 different documents of 50, 60, 70 pages was kind of lost. So somebody from the improvement team had put in this effort, and we had to redesign it all. And why or how can we solve this? Of course, we talked between the product team and business improvement teams and made sure that we know how to collaborate better and that they don't do this work in advance. But it would have been easier if we had joint goals and joint KPIs that we anyway know together how to drive towards, and we communicate in the sense of how we improve those rather than in the sense of the ready-made requirements and those lists of change this front end or add this button here. Some challenges also we had with new article search tool that we had to develop for specifically for the return centers mostly. The benefit from the tool is that you are able to find articles that otherwise don't have identification, so you don't know how to classify them and what is really the article, and it has a very good business case by itself. But it was included as part of one of those migration projects that we're working on, and didn't have exactly a place as an opportunity, as a feature anywhere on the overall roadmap. So what we did is we pulled it forward. So we pitched for the opportunity and pulled it forward on the timeline of the bigger project. But that's in the end shouldn't be something that happens in this way if we do have an ordered roadmap that is ordered according to a North Star customer fulfillment network. These adjustments, of course, on a lower scale may seem small because the tool itself was something that with the discovery, it was 1 month, and then delivery, it was around roughly a couple of months, so 3 months of work for a very small team. But the opportunity was quite big, and these types of small decisions of when to do what, when you're not aligned with strategy, can win for the company a lot and can lose a lot. So what happens next? What's next for us? Ultimately, we first of all want to understand how we relate our customer fulfillment KPIs to COV impact, and possibly come up with a similar metric also for partners and for suppliers. I didn't talk about them too much in this presentation, but they're also important. And there are some teams that are much closer to them, but there isn't a similar metric to COV that tracks them now that we actually offer services to them. It would be also great to find a way to balance those priorities of scaling and optimizing for cost with customer and supplier satisfaction. And one way to do it is with a metric that is similar to a North Star for the department itself and directly relates to the COV that we are already tracking and being concerned with on a higher level. Last but not least, in such a department that is such a mixture of decision making in operations and business and decision making and discovery in product, it would be great to also have this North Star KPI as something that everyone understands and everyone has to argument with whenever they pitch a project. So we're also trying to advocate for this more product mindset and product driven culture in the whole department as well. Still, I really like working in a department, to be honest. It's very close to the warehouses, and I love working with the physical facilities as well, and also with process-based software as such, and at this big scale too. But yes, those challenges definitely are something that we're looking forward to solve, and making sure that we build the best e-commerce fashion experience and that we can. So that was roughly from my side. First of all, thanks a lot for the attention, and I would be happy to answer some questions too.
Thanks, Maria. It was great. We have a couple of questions from some of our community members. I think I'll start with the first one, who comes from Bernhard, whom we all call Bernie. Hi, Bernie. So the question is, you mentioned that it's hard to connect to CLV to what you're doing. And what is the framework or a rough framework that you're using to solve this problem?
We haven't started actually looking into that yet. We just started discussions on it, as actually many teams in the department, because the transition to CLV was quite recent for the company as well. What we are aligning so far with are the strategic KPIs for customer fulfillment, and then the connection of those KPIs to CLV is still to come. So we're not using yet any strategy to do that. But for me, it would answer questions along the lines of if we deliver 1 day earlier for a specific customer or a group of customers, what would it mean as future profits from this group of customers? And it's not a very easy question to answer for sure.
Okay. And then a couple of more, 2 questions actually from Atanas Zaprianov. Hi, Nasko, another very active member of our community. So the first one is, you can see, how often do you talk to your internal customers? And how has this changed based on your learnings?
Actually, a lot, shortly. I don't talk to the warehouses so much in the past year because mainly the tools that we develop now, we develop also with a team of product managers, and it's easier for me to actually delegate this work directly with the warehouse users that use the software to them, because they're the ones developing the actual pieces of software. But I do talk a lot with business development, with planning teams and the innovation teams, and with process improvement. And it is to a certain extent in regular checkups. So we do have a lot of checkups between the leads of those teams.
Mhm.
And on specific projects. And the meeting culture and kind of the openness of communication in the company is very high, which is both good and bad, but it also makes you very, very close to all the other departments because you talk a lot with them. So it's a very natural, let's say, communication. It's not anything official. There is not much tension, and I guess that also comes with the time that we work together.
Mhm. If I can build on this question, because I wanted to ask you something very related to that. Do you ever watch any feedback or maybe even participate when you get a feedback from your end users, from actually Zalando's customers? Do you guys ever get anything from them?
There is a lot of A/B testing and focus groups that happens, but usually that happens in digital experience teams. So I've seen results from such studies, but I haven't actually been part of that because my products don't have to deal with that. One interesting example I can give perhaps is a project that we had as it was Hack Week project that grew further on hearing the customers in the different channels that they share information in, so on social media, in the comments on the website, also in the press, anywhere that you would have mention of some product experience that the end customer had. And it was a very interesting project that pulled all this information and filtered through it. We use it for some indication of customer opinion where we don't have a specific metric for it. For example, and I can give an example where I used it for this beauty expiration date project. I wanted to know if there are actually any customers that get expired items at any point, because we didn't have any incidents for that. I didn't have any customer context for that, but maybe somebody actually got a bad experience and talked about it. So we found a few instances in via this tool that pulls all this data, where there has been something, but thankfully it was one or two instances. So obviously our system worked well on controlling the expired products.
Okay, thanks. And then we have another one by Atanas as well. How do you implement iterations on your products? And if I can build a bit on this, because I also was wondering if you can start maybe with also telling us how do you define your hypothesis, and when you implement something or before you even implement and do the next iteration, how do you validate them?
So we validate, of course, according to KPIs. I can give maybe an example of feature that we started, but we haven't. We're just in the first version of it. So it's a feature that tries to minimize the lead time of orders that have to be picked from one warehouse and then, because the item is there, go through another one to be fulfilled. So this type of lead time we thought could be cut by parallelizing part of the internal process in the second warehouse with the transport that comes from the first. And for that, we knew already the lead times between the internal process and also the transport times. And the hypothesis was very simple, that we can cut this time. but there are quite a few guardrail KPIs on that to see if we really are able to cut it without affecting, for example, peak performance or the utilization of specific parts of the system, and also to ensure the customer impact of that some of the customers, because of this feature, actually get the order earlier, because if the lead time is only realized within the warehouse, for the customer, it doesn't really make sense. So that's, I don't know if this is the best example, but that's one of the features we built as kind of part of the migration that we anyway had to do. And the first iteration is very simplistic. It's based on FIFO model. It doesn't optimize for a lot of the guardrail KPIs that we have. But now we're taking it live. We'll monitor on them, and then we'll see if we need to improve further on specifically on the guardrail KPIs, and also hopefully think of ways to use it in other setups, because now it's only in one process setup. We are thinking of expanding it as well if it achieves its target in this first one. That was actually really easy to do because of the migration project, because we already knew we had to migrate, so we run a hypothesis along with the migration.
Do you guys work? I suppose you work in sprints, right? Some kind of sprints. How long are they?
We work in sprints, so in 2-week sprints. All the teams are actually quite synchronized in their sprints, so nobody's out of pace in the whole department. But we also work in a scaled framework that was developed within the department. That's called Sputnik, and it runs in 8-week sprints. Or it's not really 8-week sprints. It's one big planning piece of 3 sprints and 1 demo and planning sprint. So for any project that is quite complex, needs visibility, needs coordination, we run through this framework. Anything else that is more local runs in normal 2-week sprints.
Okay. So we'll get back to products and features in a moment, because there is a interesting question again coming from Bernie about product teams and how autonomous are they. And I was also actually thinking about asking the same thing or a similar thing connected to how product managers actually define their personal goals as part of their teams.
Yes, that is tricky, especially in the current setup. I think I touched on that in one of the slides. When you have teams that are so tightly connected to one deliverable, and especially if it's only one type of product, so either an algorithm or a client that the worker uses in the warehouse, it's hard to say what are the goals of this product. Is it just improving how fast this specific worker works, or is it improving the lead times that affect the end customer? And on this one, yes, you can define very local goals, but the better frame that we're looking at and want to drive forward is to actually define a bigger pieces of or bigger roadmaps across teams and PMs that drive towards a little bit of a higher KPI goal. So they can jointly think of products and changes in their areas that contribute to this KPI. You could, of course, do one product manager for this higher level KPI, but probably they won't be able to deal with the amount of developers that they have to work with. So it's better to have kind of a team that takes care of one piece. And just as an example, if we talk about lead times per order, and we have many different types of orders, not only the customer outbound, you could have a team that looks into that and optimizes for that. But this would be a few PMs together.
So just to build on that, then how do you connect those expected outcomes that the product managers would produce? How do you kind of turn them into a roadmap? What is the process for this?
Right now, we have a process for intake of an opportunity document. It's very similar to what is used in Amazon. It's called product release and FAQ. And whenever there is a discovery, usually discovery, because of the same issue that I talked about, is done between a few PMs many times, not only one person that discovers. And then they construct this document most often with feedback from the business departments and other dependencies. And on the basis of that, it's pitched, and we decide if it makes sense to take it into the operational plan of the department or not, if there is capacity, looking at the value, complexity of it, and if we're really sure of the opportunity as well, if it's convincing enough. That's the more or less the intake process, but it could be more structured for sure. When we have those higher level discovery areas, it would be easier to also come up with pitches.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another question to get back to more specific product feature discussion. How do you guys decide when to retire a feature or a whole product? That's the $1 million question always for each company, or one of the $1 million questions.
I mean, so far the main indication for us is actually quite easy. Whenever it's hard, it's a lot of effort to keep building on it, and it's hard to scale. At least on that, we definitely quite often decide to retire our products. And I can give an example with the first iteration of the migration that we try to do. So when I started with the team was already designing the second iteration of this modular architecture that we're building, because the first one wasn't scalable enough. They did design it on with a more generic idea of process and workflows in the warehouse, but it wasn't scalable enough, and it was also very easy to exploit in terms of the metadata that was possible to hide in some pieces of the structure. And unfortunately, we decided to not even build on it and try to fix it, but discontinue and go to the drawing board again. For a lot of the older tools especially in the monolith, it's quite clear because they're either outgrown themselves. So I mentioned before that this organically grown system, some of the tools are way too heavy now for the use cases that they need to carry, or that they cannot be developed further because the way that they've been connected so far is just not sustainable, and we have to put a lot of effort to develop for the next use case.
So to understand better, so for every product, you have a scorecard or something like that, that is used to evaluate whether it should be continued or not, or is that what you mean?
It's not that structured. I wish it were that structured. But it's happening, I guess, more on the higher level of transitioning from the monolith then to the new architecture. We haven't sunsetted yet, I think, anything from the new architecture. So for the new set of tools, we definitely can have this type of process with not really a scorecard, but with some kind of evaluation of whether or not this is still needed, or the use cases can be carried easily in a different way. But yes, most of the sunsetting has been now around the overall transition, I would say.
Okay. Then a slightly more interesting question about Amazon and you guys and same-day shipping.
We already do that. We have actually one of the KPIs of customer fulfillment is the so-called Zalando premium share, which is exactly that same day and next day delivery with the cutoff on the same day. And that's something that we're investing in and trying to grow.
Okay. Um, then, as maybe a slightly to return you more to the product managers and how you guys work in the company. It's interesting to understand what is the framework or what is the process of actually growing as a product manager in Zalando.
That's a good question. I mean, overall, we have a very good now we have a very good structure of expectations of the product role, because at some point, as everything in a fast-paced growth company, the requirements and the product role as well grew organically into something in each area, and it was obvious that you don't have a very standardized expectation set for the role. So what our leadership did actually a year and a half ago is set together in working groups to define the product expectations per grade. So there is, of course, product manager, senior, principal, head, and then afterwards executive level. And this is clearly defined for the interview requirements. So you have a list of the skill set that you need to cover, also with questions that check on that, and also in the evaluations of like the continuous evaluations in the company. It's because the feedback culture is so strong, and evaluations also require a lot of feedback by at least 5-6 different colleagues in the year that you worked with. You have a good understanding in the end of whether or not this person can be pitched for promotion or not, and this happens mainly on the basis of covering those capabilities in the framework, but also on the basis of impact. So in the end, this is still standing, something that you contributed either in discovery or making sure that something gets delivered to deliver a specific impact. If it's sizable, then of course it's also really easy to advocate for promotion.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question, since here in Bulgaria it's already getting a bit late. Maybe we can get this one, which is actually very interesting. It seems that it's a very performance-driven culture, right? Outcomes, KPIs, metrics about everything. So how do you define those strategic goals? Maybe if I can expand a bit the question, what is the annual goal, a strategic goal definition process, and is it top down, bottom up? How is then it communicated throughout the teams?
Yes, so we used to have OKRs. We don't have them anymore
Wow.
because
Okay. Why?
Because they weren't working. At least in the way we were defining them, it was very subjective, and it was unfortunately very easy to, I guess, manipulate as a process. So a lot of the more strategic, heads of departments and directors were easily defining them and then marking them in some way that is not. There's again not a very good way to relate to impact. So that is not used in, at least in our department, for the past year. And now the way we align goals is, I would say, more on a top level, because the more we grow, the more the impactful initiatives are actually cross department. And that's of course, one of the challenges of scaling. But you do need these agreements between the digital experience or the shop, logistics, also the supporting the digital foundation teams that support all the developers in the company. And you need to know more or less what are the things that you definitely want to get out or to invest in this year, and that is decided on VP SVP level. And from there, on a very high level, you have a definition of what has to be improved for the next year as a definite priority that we need to deliver, and that's what we orient our effort around. What is left as capacity for something else, sometimes not too much, but at least in those plans, you consider, of course, the discovery that happened in the teams in the previous year. So there is a way to pitch things that would be possibly part of next year's plan in this way. But yes, a lot of it is aligned on top level.
And how do you prioritize in terms of all of these, what to be left and so on? Is everything connected first to potential revenue or
some of the things
savings maybe?
Yes, I mean, in the end, the North Star is for the company is still COV, so it's not only about one or the other, but we want to continue to grow with the pace that we set ourselves in an efficient way, and I think most of the initiatives are a balance between trying to expand the customer base that we already have, or further sell more to existing customers, and have an optimal, scalable process. In the end, this is inevitably something that has to be balanced constantly, and that's still in the responsibility, I would say, of top management to do that. So because it is on this much higher level, it's hard to optimize for it by yourself.
Okay, I think we will end here. Thank you, Maria. It was great to host you here at ProductTank Sofia. And that's it from us. Good night, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you as well. Stay safe.